I let my children believe my shares were worth pennies, then a merger made them $150 million, 0 cents. I just want to find out who really cares about me, but they called too late. You're a washed-up old hag, pretending your stocks mean something. Layla spat the words like venom, her eyes cold and unyielding. Why don't you stop begging and finally face that no one wants you here? Her voice rose so sharply it echoed off the faded walls of the living room, as if demanding that everyone present share in her contempt. We've lived better without you, and we'll live better after you're gone. The words hit me harder than any physical blow, yet I stood silent, feeling a strange calm settle over me amid the storm of cruelty. I am Mira, a woman in her 70s, living alone in the old house my late husband and I built decades ago in Nevada. This house holds memories of laughter, hardship, and promises kept through the years. But now it is a battlefield where my own children have turned against me. They see me as nothing but a burden, a relic clinging to the past with delusions of wealth. The stocks I hold? Worth pennies, they say. A cruel joke I have let them believe to avoid the chaos that truth might bring. Their disdain is palpable, hanging heavy in the air during the family meeting they forced upon me today. The room was packed with relatives, their faces cold, their words sharper than knives. Layla and Oliver, my son and daughter-in-law, took the lead, circling me with accusations masked as concern. "You've been holding us back," Layla accused, her voice dripping with scorn. "You've been the one mother who refuses to let us rise, hoarding your little stocks like some selfish miser." Yet, amid their harsh words, my mind drifted to moments long past. The laughter of my children playing in these very halls, Robert's gentle smile as he held my hand. Those memories gave me the strength to stand silently, preparing for a reckoning they could never foresee. Oliver chimed in, his tone cruel and dismissive. "Remember when we asked for help to buy a house and you said no? You claimed you were saving for the future, but look where that got us, nothing but disappointment." Their words twisted memories I had hoped would be kinder, painting me as the villain in a story they rewrote for their own comfort. I felt the eyes of my siblings and cousins burning into me, their judgment as harsh as my children's. I was the black sheep, the one blamed for every family failure, though the truth was far more complicated. They did not see the nights I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, the sacrifices I made silently so they could have what they needed. Now they called me a homewrecker, a destroyer of dreams, a foolish old woman who cares more for pennies than her own flesh and blood. Their cruelty was relentless. "You think your stocks will save you, but they're worthless," Layla sneered, "just like you." The weight of their words threatened to crush me, but I held my ground. Inside, I was preparing for a battle they could not see coming. For years, I had allowed them to believe the stocks were insignificant, but beneath that facade lay a secret they could never have imagined. The tension in the room escalated as Oliver slammed his fist on the table. "It's time to end this charade. Sign over those stocks now or watch everything fall apart." The threat was clear, and the gathering erupted into whispers and heated exchanges. The pressure was suffocating, yet in the midst of it all, I felt a quiet fire ignite within me. I would not give in to their demands, not now, not ever. This house, these stocks, they were not just assets. They were my legacy. Their words of hate and contempt only strengthened my resolve. They believed they held all the power, but the truth was, I was ready to reclaim it. As the meeting disbanded, the echoes of their insults lingered, but so did the knowledge that their cruelty would be their undoing. I watched them leave, their faces twisted in anger and frustration, unaware that the storm they had unleashed was only the beginning of a reckoning they could not escape. Years ago, long before the bitterness settled like dust in this old house, I was accused of something I did not do. It was a financial loss, one that shook our family to its core. They said I had been careless, that I had allowed money to slip through our fingers, that I was the reason our fortunes dwindled. The truth was far darker. It was another relative, someone close enough to hide their tracks, but cunning enough to shift the blame. They eventually confessed, but by then the damage was done, not just to the family's finances, but to my reputation, my standing, my very place within the family. What no one dared to admit was that forgiving me would mean admitting they had been wrong all along. Some feared losing control of the family legacy, so they chose to keep blaming me. This unspoken greed poisoned their hearts and made reconciliation impossible. Yet despite the confession, not one of my children, nor any of the relatives who once embraced me, ever uttered a word of apology. Instead, they clung to their narrative, a tale of betrayal and greed that cast me as the villain. I became the black sheep, the family's curse, the woman who tore us apart. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered. I was left standing on the outside of a family that once was my world. I remember those years vividly. When my husband passed, it was I who held the household together. I raised my children alone, juggling jobs, making sacrifices that never showed on paychecks or bank statements. I was the one who stayed up nights nursing a sick child, the one who skipped meals so they could eat, the one who gave up dreams for the sake of theirs. Yet none of that mattered. Instead of gratitude, I received accusations. You were never there when we needed you, they said. You only cared about saving money for some future that never came. They judged me with a cruel double standard. When they made mistakes, I was expected to forgive and forget, to cover for their debts and shortcomings. But when I asked for respect or a simple thank you, I was met with cold indifference or sharp rebukes. They called me selfish for holding on to the stocks, but they spent recklessly without a second thought. They accused me of greed when all I wanted was security, a future for them that I hoped they would one day understand. This hypocrisy deepened the rift. It fed the fire of resentment on both sides, building walls too high to climb. I became a ghost in my own family's story, a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. The isolation was painful, but it also steeled me. I learned to survive in the silence, to hold on to my dignity when everything else seemed to be crumbling. Through it all, I kept my secret, the stocks. They thought they had stripped me of everything, but they could not touch that. It was my quiet rebellion, my hope that someday the truth would come to light and justice would be mine. Until then, I bore their scorn with as much grace as I could muster, waiting for the moment when the scales would finally tip. For years, I let them believe my shares were worth nothing, mere pennies that barely held any value. I did this deliberately. It was a shield, a way to keep the vultures at bay, to prevent endless fights and unwanted demands. They thought the stocks were little more than sentimental clutter, an outdated investment that was more trouble than it was worth. They laughed at me behind my back, mocked my so-called foolish clinging to worthless paper. But I knew better. Those shares were not just pieces of paper. They were a silent legacy, carefully safeguarded in a secret investment fund created by my late husband, Robert. Robert was a visionary, always thinking several moves ahead. Years before his passing, he had set up this trust, placing the stocks under a pseudonymous fund to protect them from prying eyes and greedy hands. I had the knowledge, the access codes, and the patience to wait for the right moment. Over the years, I followed every market shift, every rumor, every subtle hint of change. When whispers of a massive merger surfaced, I felt a quiet thrill deep inside. That merger would skyrocket the value of those shares, turning what seemed like pennies into a fortune that would shock everyone. I kept this secret close, hiding it beneath layers of calm and resignation. To the world, and especially to my children, it was nothing. I smiled and nodded when they dismissed the stocks, feigning ignorance and apathy. This was my quiet revenge, a game of waiting, while they treated me like a relic, a burden, a joke. But secrecy has its limits. At the next family meeting, the tension boiled over. Layla and Oliver, the most impatient and greedy among them, demanded I sell the shares to them at a fraction of their soon-to-be value. They spoke with false sweetness, masking threats behind hollow promises. When I refused, the atmosphere turned hostile and sharp like a winter storm. "You're ruining everything for us again," Layla spat, eyes flashing. "Why do you keep clinging to these worthless stocks? Just sell them already. We could make a fortune, and you're standing in our way." Oliver leaned in, voice low and menacing. "You think you're clever? Playing us all? Give us the shares or we'll make sure you regret it." Their words cut deeper than any insult. They called me names, selfish, obstinate, crazy old woman, and accused me of greed, of being the architect of their suffering. They twisted every sacrifice I had made into a weapon against me. I stood my ground, refusing to be cowed. I told them the truth. The stocks were worth far more than they imagined, and I had no intention of handing them over on their terms. their faces hardened, the betrayal palpable. The room was thick with rage, disappointment, and a chilling promise that this war was far from over. I knew then that my secret was as much a threat as a salvation, and that the family I once loved had become my greatest adversary. But I was ready. I had waited a long time for this moment, and I would not back down. I knew that silence would no longer protect me. The time had come to fight back, not with anger, but with evidence. I reached out to Martin, an old family lawyer who had always treated me with respect, the one person outside my immediate circle I still trusted. I explained everything, the insults, the threats, the greed masked as concern. He promised to help, starting with documenting everything meticulously, but I also needed the truth to reach beyond just the courtroom. I contacted Evelyn, an investigative journalist known for exposing family betrayals and corporate scandals alike. She listened carefully, intrigued by my story. Together we devised a plan to catch them red-handed, to capture the venom they spewed when they thought I wasn't listening. I began setting subtle traps, inviting Layla and Oliver over under the guise of negotiations, all while Evelyn discreetly recorded the conversations. Hidden microphones and cameras were placed with precision in the rooms where the harshest words were sure to be spoken. I kept my composure, playing the patient, reasonable matriarch, while the cameras caught their true colors. Their sneers, their veiled threats, their dismissive remarks about my age, my intelligence, and my supposed incompetence. Meanwhile, Martin worked behind the scenes to secure all legal documentation related to the stocks and the impending merger. We coordinated the timing meticulously. We would reveal the merger's impact on the stock's value and my rightful ownership on the very same day Evelyn's exposé aired, maximizing the shock to my family and the public. Predictably, Layla and Oliver caught wind of the rumors and panicked. They scrambled to control the narrative, attempting to spread false information, contacting shareholders, and trying to suppress news of the merger. They even went so far as to try to bribe or intimidate some of the people who had access to insider information, desperate to keep the truth hidden. But their efforts were in vain. My preparations were airtight. Evelyn's team had already secured exclusive interviews and verified every fact, while Martin's legal expertise ensured that every document was foolproof. On the day of the reveal, the house of cards Layla and Oliver had built began to crumble in front of their eyes. Their panic was visible, their arrogance replaced by fear. The family they had hoped to manipulate into handing over my legacy now watched as their schemes were broadcast and documented for all to see. I stood tall, knowing that this time I was the one holding all the cards. The day ended not with screams or breakdowns, but with the cold, undeniable power of truth. My children's facade of control shattered, and I prepared for the final act of this long, bitter play. The day the merger news broke, the stock price didn't just rise, it soared, skyrocketing, to a staggering valuation of $150 million, 0 cents. The quiet little asset I had kept under wraps suddenly became the crown jewel of a massive corporate deal, and with it, the very foundation of my children's plans began to crumble. I watched as my phone lit up with calls, texts, and emails, all from the people who had once called me a burden and dismissed my shares as worthless pennies. Layla was the first to call, her voice trembling with a desperation that was both pitiful and infuriating. "Mom, please, we had no idea. We thought you were being stubborn, but this changes everything. We want to make things right." Oliver followed with a string of messages, each more pleading than the last. "We're sorry for everything. We want to be part of your life again and the family business. Please, just give us a chance." But I remained silent. I did not answer. I let their words hang unanswered in the digital ether. I knew this was their moment, the moment they realized how completely they had underestimated me. Their greed had blinded them to the truth for so long, and now, faced with the consequences, they scrambled to save their fractured reputations and shattered relationships. Then came the call for a final family meeting. I agreed to meet, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I owed them one last chance to face the truth. The room was heavy with tension when we gathered. The faces before me were lined with guilt, shame, and a desperate hunger for forgiveness and inclusion. Layla's voice cracked as she admitted, "Mom, we were wrong. We let our greed cloud our judgment. We don't want to lose you or the family over this." Oliver nodded, adding, We want to make amends, share the responsibility, and rebuild what we broke. But I looked them squarely in the eyes and said, "It is too late for that. You had every chance to care when it mattered. Your words now cannot undo years of neglect and cruelty." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling like a final verdict. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, trust, and the genuine love they never showed. The shares were mine, yes, but more importantly, my dignity was reclaimed. I told them, this family was not built on greed or entitlement. It was built on sacrifices you refused to honor. The stock is no longer yours, but my love and forgiveness will remain forever out of reach. As I left that room, I felt a profound sense of closure. They had chased after a fortune too late, and I had claimed my peace on my own terms. The shock had passed, but the lessons lingered, and this time, I was the one who truly won. After the final confrontation, I took decisive legal action. The shares, once the source of bitter family disputes, were formally transferred to two organizations I deeply respected, the National Senior Care Foundation and the Veterans Support Alliance. These institutions, dedicated to the welfare of the elderly and those who served our country, would ensure the assets were used for good, honoring both my husband's legacy and my values. My children received no inheritance from these shares, not a single dollar. I made it clear in the legal documents that this was intentional. I wanted no part of their greed, no crumbs to be scattered on a path paved with betrayal. News of this transfer quickly spread throughout our community and beyond. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives who had once whispered behind my back now openly condemned my children. Ungrateful, selfish, greedy. These words echoed through social circles, leaving them isolated and discredited. The social consequences were swift and harsh. Job opportunities dried up as employers hesitated to associate with a family publicly embroiled in scandal. Rental applications were denied without explanation. Invitations to social events stopped coming. Slowly, the people who once called them family turned their backs, unwilling to be connected to such callousness. Layla's phone rarely rang, except for collections agencies and legal notices. Oliver faced mounting debts, his confidence shattered by rejection and the public's harsh judgment. The financial crisis was compounded by a deep emotional toll, anxiety, shame, and a growing awareness that their actions had not only cost them wealth, but also the respect of everyone they cared about. The court of public opinion was unforgiving. Their fall from grace became a cautionary tale, retold in hushed tones at gatherings and in online forums alike. Meanwhile, I found solace in knowing that the fortune was no longer a weapon against me, but a beacon of hope for those truly in need. One evening, as I sat quietly by my window, I reflected on the painful journey. The silence was peaceful now, filled not with accusations, but with the calm assurance that justice, in its own time, had been served. The final blow came when Layla confided in a close friend, "We destroyed our own mother's trust for greed. Now we have nothing, no money, no family, no future." And with that, the story of their downfall was complete, a fitting consequence for those who chose greed over love, ignorance over gratitude, and betrayal over family. I, Mira, had reclaimed my life, not with vengeance but with integrity, and that truth was worth more than all the shares in the world. The months following their downfall were harsh for Layla and Oliver. The weight of lost fortune, shattered reputations, and social exile crushed any remnants of pride they once held. Desperation drove them to the only person they had wronged the most, me. One cold evening, the doorbell rang incessantly. I knew who it was before I opened the door. There they stood, disheveled, weary, eyes shadowed by regret, yet burning with a hunger for forgiveness they had no right to ask for. Layla's voice trembled as she pleaded, "Mom, please, we made terrible mistakes. We want to make things right. Just give us a chance to fix this." Oliver nodded beside her, his usual arrogance stripped away, replaced by vulnerability. "We don't want the money anymore, just your trust. Please, Mira, we're begging." I looked at them calmly, the years of betrayal and pain crystallizing in my gaze. "I don't want your money," I said quietly but firmly. "I want something much rarer. Your genuine love and respect. That's the only thing I ever wanted from you." Their faces faltered, the gravity of my refusal sinking in. The gap between us was no longer just about shares or wealth, it was about broken bonds and lost chances. But their desperation twisted into frustration. Layla's tone hardened. "You think you can just shut us out and everything will be fine? You owe us. You owe us a second chance." Oliver stepped forward, voice sharp. "If you don't reconsider, you'll regret it. You won't be able to live in peace." I was prepared. Behind the door waited my attorney and 2 police officers. Having anticipated their threats, I secured a restraining order years earlier. When Layla and Oliver crossed that line, I called the police immediately. My attorney was on standby, and the officers arrived swiftly to enforce the law. I had anticipated this moment, had gathered every document, every recorded message of threats and harassment. Before they could escalate, the officers stepped in. "You are in violation of a restraining order," one said firmly as they moved to detain Layla and Oliver. Their protests were weak, their anger hollow. I watched as they were handcuffed, their power slipping through their fingers like sand. In that moment, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for the family that once was, now fractured beyond repair. Their futile attempts to intimidate or coerce me had only sealed their fate further. I closed the door quietly, the lock clicking shut, a symbolic end to their reign of cruelty. In the silence, I whispered to myself, "I never wanted this war. I only wanted to be loved." But love, I realized, is earned, not demanded. And sometimes, the hardest part of victory is learning to live without those you once called family. I left the storm behind me, left the bitterness, the endless battles, and the hollow words of those who once called themselves my children. I found refuge in a small, peaceful house nestled in a quiet neighborhood where the only sounds were bird song and the gentle breeze whispering through the trees. It was nothing like the grand homes I once tried to hold on to, but it was mine, truly mine, and that made all the difference. Here, I planted flowers in the front yard, roses and lavender that bloomed bright against the soft California sun. Each petal was a symbol of renewal, a reminder that life always finds a way to heal. I adopted a little tabby cat who curled up in my lap every evening, a silent companion who asked for nothing but love in return. For the first time in years, I was living not for others' approval or greed, but for myself and the few genuine souls who cared for me. The phone stopped ringing with desperate pleas and empty promises. Layla and Oliver's names faded from my mind as their regret weighed heavily on their own shoulders, far from the warmth I now embraced. They had lost the chance to hurt me, but more importantly, they lost the chance to be part of my peace. With every passing day, the burden of the past lifted. No longer was I shackled by their judgments, their accusations, or their coldness. The wounds left by years of betrayal healed beneath the gentle care of solitude and kindness. I found a quiet strength in simply being free, free to smile without fear, free to breathe without pain, free to finally rest. As twilight draped the sky in hues of purple and gold, I sat on my porch with a cup of herbal tea, the cool evening air brushing against my skin. I looked at the horizon and allowed a soft, contented smile to settle on my face. This was my victory. Not a loud declaration, but a calm, steady reclaiming of my life. I was no longer defined by their cruelty or my past suffering. I was defined by the peace I had fought so fiercely to find, and in that peace I was home. I was free. After all the storms I had weathered, the betrayals, the insults, the battles fought not just in court but in my own heart, I finally found myself in a place I never thought possible. Peace. The quiet kind of peace that isn't born from silence, but from the storm having passed, and knowing you stood firm through every wind and wave. I woke every morning in my little home, tucked away from the noise and the memories that used to haunt every corner of my old family house. The sunlight spilled softly through lace curtains, warming the wooden floorboards that creaked beneath my slippers. I breathed in the scent of freshly watered soil, of blooming jasmine and rosemary I'd planted outside my window. Outside, the hummingbirds flitted from flower to flower, unaware of the battles I'd fought to earn this calm. It was a freedom I cherished more than any fortune. After decades spent being misunderstood, judged, and discarded by those I had loved most, I finally lived for myself. For the first time in years, I was not a mother fighting for respect, not a widow clinging to memories. but simply Mira, the woman who had survived it all and was thriving on her own terms. The house was modest, but every corner told a story of renewal. A freshly painted bench sat beneath the front porch, perfect for sipping tea and watching the world go by. Inside, an old rocking chair, once my mother's, held a soft quilt I had sewn with my own hands. It was far from fancy, but it was mine. I had taken to gardening with an almost religious devotion. The earth grounded me, the steady rhythm of planting and tending, healing wounds words never could. The tomatoes ripened under the summer sun, the lavender filled the air with its calming scent, and the little vegetable patch promised meals I would prepare slowly, savoring every bite as a reminder that I was alive, whole, and deserving. My days followed a gentle rhythm, morning walks to the local market where everyone knew my name, afternoons spent curled up with books, evenings sharing stories with a close-knit circle of friends I'd made since starting anew. These were not the frenetic, chaotic gatherings of my past family dinners, where greed and bitterness often drowned out laughter. These were real connections, born of shared kindness and mutual respect. Still, some mornings, as I tended the garden, a flicker of memory would cut through the calm, the sharp words, the cold stares, the sting of betrayal. The pain never completely vanished. Scars do not simply disappear, but they had softened, become part of the texture of my life rather than its definition. What surprised me most was the way forgiveness began to take root, not from my children or relatives who had wronged me, but from myself. I forgave myself for the years I had spent trying to hold a broken family together, for the times I had doubted my own worth. I realized that my value was never tied to their acceptance or my financial assets. I was worthy simply because I existed. Occasionally, I'd receive letters or calls from distant cousins or old friends, people who had watched from afar and only now understood the truth behind the rumors and false accusations. Their apologies were heartfelt, their words a balm to wounds still tender. I accepted their kindness with an open heart, grateful for the reminder that family, in its truest sense, can be found beyond bloodlines. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Emily, the daughter of a longtime neighbor who had passed away, came bearing a basket of homemade cookies and a notebook filled with stories she'd written about remarkable women in the community. "I wanted to include you," Emily said shyly. "You're a hero to a lot of us. You've shown what strength really means." Her words warmed me more than any tea ever could. I shared with her some of the stories from my past, not the pain, but the lessons, the hope, and the resolve. Together, we talked about legacy, not the money left behind, but the courage to stand up, the power of resilience, and the importance of kindness. It was in these moments, sharing with the next generation, that I found a new purpose. I started volunteering at the local senior center, helping organize activities, listening to stories, and offering a shoulder to those who, like me, had faced loneliness or loss. The smiles I saw, the gratitude in their eyes, filled a space in my heart that had long been empty. One evening, sitting on my porch swing with a cup of chamomile tea, I thought about the long journey that had brought me here. The cold faces of my children, the courtroom battles, the sting of rejection, it all seemed like a distant shadow compared to the warmth of the life I now led. I realized that the true victory was not in the money I had given away or the legal battles won, but in reclaiming my own story, in rewriting the narrative from one of pain and betrayal to one of empowerment and grace. Freedom, I learned, was not just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of peace, the ability to wake up each day without fear, without anger, and with a heart open to joy. As the stars began to twinkle overhead and the night whispered through the trees, I felt a deep gratitude for the love I had lost, for the lessons I had learned, and for the new life I was building, one rooted in truth, kindness, and unshakable strength. And in that quiet moment, with the gentle breeze brushing my cheek, I smiled, not just at the world around me, but at the woman I had become. Life after the storm often brings surprises, unexpected gifts hidden in the folds of everyday moments. For me, Mira, those gifts began arriving gently but surely, opening doors I never thought I'd dare to approach again. One of the first blessings was the rediscovery of friendship. In my old life, surrounded by family but often feeling utterly alone, genuine companionship was rare. Now, in my new world, friendships blossomed, not because of shared bloodlines or obligations, but because of shared kindness and respect. I joined a local book club, a small but lively group of women and men who gathered once a week to discuss everything from classic literature to the latest mysteries. The laughter in those rooms was different, free and easy, without the underlying tensions I had known too well. One woman, Claire, became a dear friend. She was a retired schoolteacher with a penchant for baking, and every meeting she'd bring homemade cookies that disappeared almost as quickly as the stories we shared. Claire and I began spending afternoons together, tending our gardens, exchanging recipes, and reminiscing about lives lived fully. Through her I met others, a tapestry of characters each with their own stories of survival and joy. There was Tom, a former firefighter with a gentle spirit who taught me how to paint with watercolors. And Esther, a spry octogenarian who still ran marathons and inspired us all with her zest. These friendships rekindled a part of me I thought had dimmed forever. I found myself laughing more, sharing my own stories, and even dreaming again. Then there was the unexpected joy of a new hobby, photography. One afternoon at the market, I bought a simple digital camera from a vendor who promised it would change how I saw the world. At first I was hesitant, unsure if I had the eye or patience. But as I wandered through the neighborhood, capturing sunlight filtering through autumn leaves, or the smile of a child chasing a butterfly, something awakened within me. Photography became my meditation, a way to freeze moments of beauty and tenderness that otherwise might slip away unnoticed. I started posting my pictures on a small blog, Mira's Moments, where I paired each photo with a short reflection or memory. The blog quickly gained followers, many older adults who found solace and inspiration in the simple images and heartfelt words. Messages poured in from strangers, thanking me for reminding them that life's small wonders are still there, waiting to be noticed. This unexpected connection gave me a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about money or status anymore. It was about sharing the joy I had found and lifting others who might be struggling in silence. One of the most surprising gifts was the return of family, but on my terms. Not my biological children, who had long since chosen their own paths, but a new kind of family formed from chosen bonds. It began with Sarah, a young woman in her 20s who worked at the local library. She had no family nearby and struggled with loneliness and self-doubt. We met during one of my visits when she noticed my blog and struck up a conversation about art and resilience. Over time, we developed a deep friendship, a bridge across generations. She called me Grandma Mira and invited me to her small apartment for dinners filled with laughter and shared dreams. Sarah's company reminded me of the joy of nurturing and being nurtured in return. We became like family, supporting each other through life's ups and downs. When she got a promotion at work, I celebrated with her, proud to see her shine. This chosen family expanded slowly. There was Michael, a widower who found comfort in my company and my stories of love and loss. Together, we started a small community garden project, inviting neighbors to plant, share harvests, and rebuild connections. The garden became a sanctuary, a place of growth, not just for vegetables, but for friendships and healing. On quiet evenings, Michael and I would sit on my porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset, paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. We talked about the past, the mistakes we'd made, and the hope we still carried. It was a companionship based on mutual respect and gentle understanding. Health, once a source of anxiety and neglect, became a priority. Freed from the stress of family conflicts, I started regular visits with a wonderful physician who encouraged me to try gentle yoga and meditation. The local community center offered classes specifically designed for seniors, and I eagerly joined. The slow, deliberate movements helped ease the aches and pains I'd long accepted as permanent. More importantly, the mindful breathing calmed the worries that sometimes surfaced. I was surprised by the mental clarity and peace this new routine brought. The body and mind, I realized, were deeply connected. Taking care of one meant caring for the other. With improved health and new passions, I began to explore my town more fully. There were hidden gems, cafes with the richest coffee, art galleries showcasing local talent, quiet parks perfect for afternoon strolls. I made it a point to try something new each week, whether a cooking class, a pottery workshop, or a dance lesson. The thrill of learning, of stepping outside my comfort zone, brought an excitement I had not felt in years. Travel, once a distant dream, also became a possibility. I joined a travel group for seniors and took a short trip to a nearby national park. Standing beneath towering trees and beside crystal-clear lakes, I felt a profound connection to the world's beauty and its endless possibilities. But the most profound gift of all was the ability to forgive, not just others, but myself. The heavy burden of resentment and regret I had carried for decades began to lift, replaced by compassion and understanding. I realized that holding on to anger only chained me to the past. Letting go freed me. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting the hurt or excusing those who had wronged me. It meant reclaiming my peace and choosing joy over bitterness. Each day became a step forward, a celebration of resilience and grace. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I tended to my garden, I felt a deep gratitude wash over me. Life had not turned out as I had once planned, nor as I had hoped, but it had given me something precious, a second chance. I was no longer defined by loss or betrayal. I was defined by the love I had found, the friendships I had nurtured, and the strength I had discovered within myself. In this new chapter, I embraced the unexpected gifts, the laughter of friends, the warmth of chosen family, the joy of discovery, and the freedom of self-acceptance. And as the golden leaves danced in the breeze and the evening sky blazed with color, I smiled, knowing that this life, my life, was exactly what I needed all along. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt underestimated, pushed aside, or forgotten, remember this: strength often comes quietly, and justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, the most powerful victories are the ones won with patience, resilience, and heart. If you want to hear more true stories of courage, revenge, and triumph from women like me, make sure to subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss the next chapter in the lives of those who refuse to be silenced or forgotten. Because here, every story matters, every voice is heard, and every grandma has a story worth telling. Subscribe now and join us for the next true story that will inspire you to stand strong no matter what.